So the only reason why you would conclude that technology would cause headcount to shrink is you'd say companies have run out of ideas or they can't execute them fast enough. And the funny thing about AI is AI helps with both of those problems. I think that the more interesting scenario here is companies realize we can shortcut the strategy to execution flow.
All right, welcome back. Today's episode, we have Neel Doshi from Factor AI, and he's got a deep background in building companies, an author of a best-selling book. And Neel, it's great to have you on the show. Pumped to hear you, man.
John, thank you very much. Really appreciate being here.
Great. Well, for anybody that's not familiar with Factor AI, can you give us a kind of a high level on what you guys do and who you serve and how that looks?
Yeah, absolutely. If I took a step back, some of the folks in your audience might recognize us as the authors of Prime to Perform. And for those of you guys who read Prime to Perform, it's the science of performance. How does it work? And a big part of Prime to Perform talks through two major themes. One theme is the need for adaptability as a critical part of performance. And the second is how human motivation links to adaptability. What we found was that in the years since we published our book, I go on the world tour. I've been talking to executives and CEOs all over the place. The fundamental thing I kept hearing was, we completely agree with the thesis and the research in your book. Like, it's unassailable. The challenge is it's just gotten so much harder to lead high-performing organizations these days. Like, everything from the constant pace of change, which is only accelerating. This is the new normal, like forever change, to demographic changes, the needs of the new generation, the needs of managing remote and hybrid work, global teams. It's just become harder in just every dimension to lead high-performing teams. And so we built Factor AI as the all-in-one AI augmentation platform for leaders. So essentially every workflow that a leader would need to do to build a motivating, high-performing team, Factor provides a unique AI experience that helps that team perform and reach peak levels of motivation.
Really interesting. Yeah, and I had a chance to take a peek at the platform and how it works. And I loved that it was kind of human in the middle AI. So it's not eliminating the human element, but it's enhancing the experience from the top down. And I'd love to hear kind of more about how you guys develop that and what it is most effective at helping businesses solve.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really glad you noticed that, because that's a big part of what we're trying to get right. Like, a few ways to think about this. One is, if you think about the opportunity to use AI to improve work, there's obviously the opportunities that are about AI to replace humans, but there's a very large set of opportunities that's AI to augment humans. And the easiest, simplest, and often largest business plans or business cases are actually AI augmenting humans. Like, think about the business case for vibe coding right now. That's AI augmenting humans. Now, one step further, in many companies, if you look at the employee segment that has the largest cost associated with it, it's actually people leaders. And it's not engineers, it's not customer support teams, it's actually people leaders are typically the employee segment with the largest cost associated to it. And if that's the case, then, and by the way, this is the segment that owns the most critical workflow in an organization. Like, if you think about workflows in an organization, one of the most critical ones, in fact, if not the most critical one, is the strategy to execution workflow, where essentially we start with strategy and ultimately it becomes things that we do differently in our markets. Leaders own the strategy to execution workflow. That workflow in most organizations hasn't been improved since 1950. And as a result, organizations are way slower than they need to be, way more demotivated than they need to be, burning out in ways that they really shouldn't be. And so what we saw was that if we want to create a golden age of work, one where every human being on the planet has a great job, they're really performing to their best in that job, they're actually feeling a great deal of self-motivation in that work. If we want to create that world, which we can absolutely create, like, we have all the means to create that world.
Right.
Then what we needed to do is fix that strategy to execution workflow. And the best way we've ever seen to fix it is by augmenting leaders with AI.
Interesting. Yeah, because the leadership role is so crucial and the team is following the lead, right? And if the leader is overrun with work and they don't have enough time to think or come up with a creative strategy to go forward, right? You guys are allowing them to one, save time, but also can you talk to like the coaching aspect of your tool and how that works with the top down?
Yeah, 100%. One way to think about AI, especially in the area of AI augmenting humans, we often think about this in two dimensions. Dimension one is people prompting AI and versus AI prompting people. And the other dimension is individual or collective. Now, each of those boxes, essentially in that 2x2, has an AI use case, like AI prompting people collectively, AI prompting people individually. So Factor essentially provides all of the AI workflows and tools for all four of those situations. So for example, AI prompting people. One of the things that Factor does is it gives your whole organization an AI chief of staff. So imagine you had a 10,000 person organization, you're the CEO of that organization. In most cases, that CEO is truly flying blind. Like the visibility they have into what's going on is actually incredibly limited. Now, imagine you had a good chief of staff. That chief of staff is trying to figure out the important stuff. They're talking to a lot of people every week. They're distilling that important stuff to that CEO. And that's wonderful. That's an incredibly valuable thing to provide. One of the experiences in Factor in the AI nudging people category is every week Factor interviews every colleague. And in doing so, it's trying to understand like, hey, John, let's talk about what your priorities are and how's that going? And, oh, I see you're kind of stuck here. Like, can I or anyone else help you in getting unstuck? And what the AI does in all that is it gives everybody in the organization guidance on where they could be most impactful to other colleagues. And so that's just one example of something like 50 different AI workflows in Factor.
Interesting.
And that's only one form of coaching. There's a second form of coaching that's different from that entirely. One of the most important workflows we've seen in organizations in that strategy to execution journey is how priorities cascade. And what we look at the average organization, priorities don't cascade. Like if you were to look in the average organization and ask the average lead team, how clear are your priorities? The answer you get is they're not clear at all.
Right.
Now, if you don't have clear priorities, this is the foundation of employee motivation and performance. Fundamentally, if you don't have clear priorities, nothing really builds on that foundation. There's no house that you can create on top of that.
Right.
But in most organizations, this is actually a real big problem. And why? Well, because that cascade is hard to do. Like it's hard for a leader to, in any meaningful amount of time, actually help all the teams below them understand what they have to focus on to solve for those executive level priorities. Our AI workflow works with each team and coaches them on how to do that, get to the point with crystal clear priorities in just a matter of hours, not months. So these are examples of what we mean by how AI can actually coach motivation and performance in a way that's actually really, really hard to do in today's environment.
Interesting. I wish I would have had this in some of my previous lives.
Me too, man. Like I think about my first times leading teams where I was clueless and didn't know it. Like my blind spot was just so big. I just didn't even know what I wasn't doing. And that's really hard. If you're a leader and you don't even know what you're missing, how do you even close that gap? And so I cringe now when I think about the times I was leading teams for the first and second times and just how ineffective I was. And so I'm with you. I wish I had something like this going back in time. And I'm grateful I have something like this right now.
So whenever it's creating the priority list, how does that work? Are the leaders are they being led by the AI, or are they kind of saying, okay, we need to get this done, and this done, and then the AI helps manage the org?
What's really cool about that particular workflow is in the typical organization, the way you'd want it to work is the executive team has some priorities, like they're naming what they think the priorities are of the organization for the next few months. The next level down ideally takes those priorities and breaks them into smaller priorities for the teams below them. Teams below them take those smaller priorities and ideally break those down. Now, the AI does a bunch of things. The AI I wouldn't say the AI is leading the team because that just doesn't feel right. Like what I would say is AI is like a performance coach that's sitting alongside that team, helping them do that. So what will the AI do? Well, one, it'll help them not just understand, not just see, but see and understand their leaders' priorities. Because often that's missing. Like I was working with a financial institution, for example. You mentioned that you came from one. And I was working in a financial institution, and what we found is frontline teams didn't know or understand their leaders' priorities. And so how are they going to actually be empowered to do anything about that? And so one, the AI helps them to do that. Now, the second thing that the AI helps the teams do is the best way for a team to engage in strategic priorities is not by creating a bunch of tasks or deliverables. The best way is actually for the team to identify the problems they need to solve. Now, if you can actually get into a problem-solving orientation, you get to peak performance, peak motivation. But that's hard. That's a set of skills that not many have.
Right.
But the AI can do this in no time. So the AI will help the team look at their leaders' priorities, look at the team's own skills, scope, capabilities, and say, here's the set of priorities that you might want to solve. But you might have your own ideas, and that's okay too. And I can help take your ideas and help you identify the problem you need to solve. And then from there, what you need to do to really create a motivating, high-performing team is to set the right guardrails and expectations around those problems to solve. Most leaders don't really know how to do that. I'll tell you myself, I didn't know how to do any of that. And the AI walks the team through how do you set the right guardrails and expectations around those problems. And it does all of that in literally minutes, not what usually we see, which is months.
Okay, interesting.
Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I mean, a lot of leaders are good at certain things, but sometimes setting expectations and also like coming up with, the things that solve the biggest problems in a timely manner there's a lot of disconnect, especially in the old world I used to live in, right? Everybody focuses on revenue. It's like, okay, what do we need to do to get in front of people to generate new clients and or opportunities?
100%. We're implementing factor in an organization right now where, of course, like any organization, they're striving to grow their revenue as fast as they can. But once upon a time, when they would say that they have a revenue goal, the goal cascades down. Like, so everyone knows, like, yeah, I guess our revenue goal is 20%. But to your point, the real question is, well, how? And often teams think what the leaders are saying is, okay, I guess they're just asking me to either take shortcuts or just grind harder. And more likely than not, actually, no, what leadership is really trying to say is, can you figure out what problems we need to prioritize solving to actually get to this outcome and then solve those problems? That's really what they're trying to say, but that's really tricky and hard and not easy to pull off. And so all of that we can put on Rails right now. And that's, by the way, one of 50 workflows, which kind of gives you a sense of just how difficult leadership is today.
Wow. So if you were to classify maybe like top 3 workflows that are most effective within your tools.
So top 3 out of 50 is not an easy question, but I'll do my best.
Okay.
One is what I just described. It's the cascading of priorities because it is so foundational. The second is Factor has a set of workflows that are focused on problem solving itself. So if you think that a good cascading priority is about prioritizing the right problems to solve, the second step is now solving them. And problem solving in organizations is often either slow, bureaucratic, dysfunctional, in just ways it doesn't need to be. Because it's a little bit like imagine you have 2 people dancing. One person is the world's best at tango, and the other is the world's best at swing. And you put them together, they're each doing their thing, but together it looks like a total mess. Problem solving in organizations look like that. Like you can have brilliant people in their disciplines, but then you put them together to solve a problem, each in their own kind of world and headspace. Brilliant people can result in dysfunctional problem solving very, very quickly. And so there's a set of workflows that are around leading groups of people through problem solving that are truly exceptional. Like it cuts the time, it leads to better solutions, does it all like without the dysfunction. And the third is around what an organization might typically call individual performance management. But I'm reluctant to use those words because in most organizations, what they mean by that is I've got to give John a rating at the end of the year. But what they really want to mean by that, that's why I'm kind of being distinctive here. What they really want to mean by that is as a leader, I am creating a really good apprenticeship culture for John, where John understands where John's performance is today on an absolute basis, but also John understands that we're investing in him. Like we're actually helping you grow your skills, improve in that. And so when I see most organizations, performance management, individual performance management is a broken process. I was talking to one executive where they did an analysis where they said the process itself took leaders 7 weeks out of the year. So person weeks, like actual 7-person weeks of time out of the year to run this process that when they survey their people is their most hated process. And so that's if you ask me what are my top 3, that one is today in most organizations, it's ineffective at actually performance managing. Put differently, anything that you say is about performance managing needs to drive motivation, not demotivation.
Right.
And this process in most organizations is demotivating, not motivating. And what we found is the best way to solve that is an AI-based workflow.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I remember the metrics that we would have to hit, and it's a bit daunting. So I would break them into, monthly and weekly and daily goals, and then turn that into activities that, you can chew on that piece and it's not overwhelming. Right. And then differing personalities, like some people are magic with certain things and can't communicate to save their lives. And other people are masterful with words, but can't do anything with technology. So, balancing personalities and also like leadership styles, I think that's a really unique solution to a huge problem in the business world.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like there's so many things in managing today's workforces that came from a very different era that just don't make sense in today's. Like in today's era, we're in the era of extreme decentralization. Like I'll give you an example. We've been on that journey as a society for the last 40 years. Like really, as the IT era kind of emerged, companies have been caring to do more and more decentralization. Like in theory, but not in practice. In theory, the agile movement was a movement of decentralized decision making. Didn't end up being that way in practice in a lot of places, but that was the ultimate objective. AI is going to be even more of that. I think what companies are saying, which I think is very interesting, is they're imagining a world where what companies are primarily focused on doing is shrinking themselves and headcount. And what's interesting about that is what that means is they think that companies can't do two things well. They can't decentralize ideation, and they've run out of ideas. So think about it this way. Think about how a metric that has been well studied for the last 50 years is how many robots do we have in factories? So there's actually a metric. You can Google this, like robots per person in automobile factories.
Okay.
And if you'll find is, not surprisingly, there are many, many more robots per employee today than there were in the 1970s.
Sure.
But the big car companies have more employees today than they do in the 1970s. So let's make sense of that. The reason is companies' primary incentive is to grow, not shrink. And so let's say we can do something more productively. Well, what companies will do is some of that benefit they'll bank and give to customers. Some of that benefit they'll bank and give to shareholders. But some of that benefit becomes reinvested into finding new ways to grow. And that new ways to grow often results in more variety, more customer segments, more SKUs, like more. Companies get more and more complicated in doing that. And therefore, headcount is growing in the long stretch of time. So the only reason why you would conclude that technology would cause headcount to shrink is you'd say companies have run out of ideas or they can't execute them fast enough. And the funny thing about AI is AI helps with both of those problems.
Right.
And so there's a world where I think some people are saying, yeah, we're going to have a one-person IPO. Okay, great. Maybe we will. That's really awesome. Or a zero person, just like an AI starts a company IPOs. But I think that the more interesting scenario here is companies realize we can shortcut the strategy to execution flow.
Mm-hmm.
And we can decentralize more ideation and problem solving.
Mm-hmm.
And if we do both those things well, we can solve significantly more customer problems significantly faster, and they're going to grow.
Right.
And I think that the problem is no one wants to talk about that side of the equation because it doesn't fit nicely into this kind of so-called business case of AI that it's about getting rid of everybody.
Right.
I think the more interesting story is just like every other technology that came before, it can actually help us solve more problems faster.
Right. Yeah. It's not about replacing the people, but it's about helping the people become more effective. So,
and I think that there's so much promise there. Like, think about how I remember once I got into an Uber. I was talking to the driver, just asking about his life and like how he's doing what he's doing. He was retired, but he's kind of doing this both for a little extra money, but he enjoys it. Like kind of getting out, meeting people, working around. And he's telling me that in the 40s and 50s, he was a account executive at one of the blue chip tech companies around that era.
Okay.
I won't name them for the sake of not naming them. But this gentleman was an African-American gentleman. So you can imagine being an AE in the 50s at a blue chip tech company was both great for that company, but also, as he described, he just never felt like he fit in properly. And so he didn't succeed at that, but then he went on to start businesses and really succeed in those. Now let's think about that problem for a moment. This person was clearly capable of creating a great deal of value. He was
Right.
clearly capable of it.
Right.
But for a variety of reasons, he couldn't fit into an organization that was actually trying to help him fit in.
Hmm.
Now, there's all sorts of versions of that today. Like I see versions of that today, whether it's cross-cultural, whether it's cross-age demographic, whether it's remote work in office. Like there's so many of these forms of friction that aren't actually about that person's ability to create value. It's about collaboration, about communication, about explanation. All of these are activities that an AI can mediate really, really well. And what people are doing right now is they're thinking about AI as it means to just write more slop. That's not the way to think about this. Like the way to think about this is, why are you writing that much at all?
Right.
You don't need to have the memos anymore. You don't need to have the PowerPoints anymore. These are legacy forms of communication when you have an AI intermediary between you and every other colleague.
Yeah, the bridging the gap aspect of it is beautiful. And we've come so far, yet some people haven't.
We've come so far, but you know, there's challenges of human nature. Like one of the things I found in organizations is there's a dialect of English that executives speak, and that there is that sort of MBA based way of communicating that is made for kind of executive language. By the way, this is true of every discipline. Like my sister is a eye surgeon, and I used to when I was really young and she was in med school, I was really good at PowerPoint and she wasn't. I would kind of help her out with like her medical presentations. And so I'll be like, why are you calling this, why do you call left eye and right eye oculo-sinestro and oculo-dextro? Can't you just call them left eye and right eye? And she's like, that. I mean, you'll see it in your prescription. It'll say ODOS on your eye prescription. And she's like, look, that's just the standard that the world of medicine is aligned on how we're going to communicate. So my point being is, like, every discipline has a version of this. Executives have their own version of this. They have a dialect that they communicate in to streamline and make it easy for them to talk. Same dialect that McKinsey speaks, by the way. Same dialect that Bain and BCG speak. What I find is there's so many people in organizations that have a glass ceiling because they don't speak that dialect. And it's not because of their IQ, it's not because of their problem-solving aptitude, they don't speak that dialect, and so they struggle to engage. The large language model started off as a translation engine from language to language. And as a fundamental tool, all of these Rosetta Stone problems in organizations, if you think differently about communication, all those problems go away literally today.
They do. It really does. I didn't know that it was developed as like a translation device first.
That's exactly the first use case. Like the first use case as this technology was being developed was to essentially map language into something that is common across all languages, like more fundamental primitive concepts. And so you can describe the math of it as you give it enough data about language, the statistics can actually map that into more primitive things. And so going from language A to language B is much easier. But by the way, there's lots of things, if you think about them the right way, are acts of translation. Like, so it's not just like English to French, and it's not just one dialect of English to another. It's even parts of conceptual problem solving can be thought of as like steps of language translation. And so that's why what we're finding is that these new technologies are incredibly powerful for the entire set of things that leaders have to do, which often boil down to, like, if you think about like a middle manager, what that often boils down to is a middle manager is a context routing machine in a company. Context comes from leaders, needs to go down to the team. Context comes from the right, needs to go to the left. And in all of that context routing, the middle management has to translate. And so, okay, and that, by the way, is an incredibly painful and time-consuming part of that job. Factor AI, you can argue that one of the big things it does better than anything else on the planet is it is a context router. It takes context from any part of the organization, gets it to the part that needs it, and while it's doing that, translates that context into things that they would understand better.
Well said. Very well said. I like that. From the top down, there's a lot of different contexts. Like you said, the MBAs speak their own language. In my old world, we had acronyms for days. And when I first started in the business, I remember writing them all down and looking them up and see what they mean. I was like, oh, why don't you just say what you just said in just a normal language?
But it's really hard, actually.
It is.
I was on a call a couple of days ago with an organization that's implementing Factor, and I had two senior executives who are about to take their first step in that implementation. They're like, Neel, I just want to understand how you're thinking about priorities. Like, here are my top priorities. And one of the other executives, his subordinate actually, both senior, in that meeting, he said, oh, that's what you're thinking about that third priority? I didn't know that's what you meant by that. And so you have two senior leaders
Right.
who weren't on the same page on what they meant by a priority. If you go down to the middle management and frontline teams, how on earth are they going to? And this is such a perfect AI use case to facilitate and get rid of all of that dysfunction.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So on that kind of front, who is your ideal customer? Like what does a best case scenario look like for Factor AI if you're going after a new customer?
Sure, totally. Generally, it's executives, CEOs, founders who are saying to themselves, I do feel like my organization has gotten sluggish, it's gotten demotivated. We're not as fast as we used to be. Like maybe we're not breaking past a plateau, or maybe a common theme we often hear from our users is we were scaling and suddenly it felt like the magic of our company was fading. Those organizations, what we can do is implement Factor really quickly. Like it's a very fast implementation. Like teams can start getting value out of it in days. And we start to do that. So that magic should never fade. We shouldn't have problems breaking through plateaus. Like no organization should feel like they're bureaucratic and bloated. And in this day and age, no one should be demotivated at work.
Interesting. I love that. I really do. And how long has the company been around? Like how long has Factor AI been operating?
So we started developing Factor AI about 3 years ago.
Okay.
So essentially 3 years ago was when we felt like the state of AI it hit an inflection point where it could meaningfully help with this problem. So we've been developing this product for the last 3 years. It's not an easy product to develop because the challenge of creating a brain for a whole company that can understand that context of a whole company, get it to the right leadership flow in the right place at the right time. Turned out that was actually a very difficult problem, like to really make the bits and pieces of that wiring work properly. So we've been developing that for about 3 years now. And what I'm really just so excited about is our dream of a workplace where everyone is motivated. We are starting to see that as happening when organizations start to use Factor. Now, I've been working on this research. Like I mentioned, we published Prime to Perform 10 years ago. I've been studying this topic of human motivation and performance for about 30 years.
Wow. So in the book, Prime to Perform, AI wasn't really a real thing. I mean, I'm sure it was kind of an idea that was being created, but did you have any like foresight into this becoming reality when you wrote that book?
We had a couple of foresights. Some of them I think were legitimate, and I think some of them were accidental, like a broken clock is right twice a day kind of foresight.
Fair.
But I'll take credit for that too. Why not? The real foresight we saw was if you unpack performance for a second, because we're talking about performance, and even that is a challenging concept. What we point out to leaders is there's two types of performance. One's called tactical, the other's called adaptive. You can think about tactical as how well we stick to our processes and plans. You can think of adaptive as how well we don't stick to our processes and plans. So these two things are definitionally opposite. Like more tactical destroys adaptive, more adaptive destroys tactical.
Right.
What we did say definitively 10 years ago is we are on a steady march as a society to automate the tactical, and what's left for people is the adaptive. And I think that's starting to bear itself out. Like what's left for people is the adaptive. What we also said when we're writing the book is that the skills of being adaptive, like the adaptive performance skills, which namely are around problem-solving skills, are like you could think about them as really fundamentally two, like prioritization and problem solving. Like you can call all of that executive function. But those skills, prioritization and problem solving, were the biggest gaps in workplaces then and have only grown today.
Right.
And so this is one of the problems. Like, there's plenty of companies we're implementing Factor in where a very small percentage of the organization really is manifesting those skills on the job. Ironically, most people actually have those skills in their personal lives. So it's not like they're incapable of it. There's dynamics at work that are actually more challenging. There's a handful that have them. It's the same 20 people. Working with one company now, it's about 10,000 people. It's the same 20 people that solve every problem. Like That's a real problem. That's a real problem of scale. It's a real problem of motivation.
Right.
And those were themes that we were pointing out even 10 years ago. What we also believed to be true was that there would be a way for technology to solve this problem, but that way didn't exist until the large language model came into existence. Because fundamentally, the problems that I'm describing are qualitative, not quantitative. Strategy, problem solving, motivation, apprenticeship, these are all qualitative problems. And the large language model was the first really capable qualitative computation machine. And so if you look at a lot of workplace software prior to Factor, it was all about quantitative value add. So for example, like if I'm building a sales funnel and I want to like do my sales forecast, that's quantitative value add.
Right.
And there's a lot of value in quantitative value add. But strategy, prioritization, problem solving, coaching, apprenticeship, planning, the skill building, all of that is qualitative. And so we needed a way to create computationally qualitative value add. So what we realized 3 years ago was LLMs were a qualitative value add machine that we can wield to solve this problem.
And inside of your system, I imagine that every time a customer uses it, it learns and iterates from that experience. Is that
totally? And what's really cool is what it learns. Think about what you want the best leader to learn. What you want them to learn is what motivates each colleague. What are the skills they're really great at? What are the skills they want to grow? What is the organization strategy and context? What is the strategy and context of my leaders? What is the strategy and context of my own team? That's the stuff that you want a great leader to learn. That's exactly what Factor learns.
Well, Neel, I really appreciate you sharing all this. Before we go, can you let our viewers know where they can find you and if they're interested in working with your company, what's the best way to get in touch?
Absolutely. If you have any of these problems, I want to just make sure you realize these can be solved now. Don't give up on motivating your people. Don't give up on burnout. Don't give up on performance and adaptability. All this is solvable now. You can reach out to us at factor.ai. So you can get to the website. You'll see a contact us form. You can send me a note on LinkedIn. I'm Neel Doshi at factor.ai. Feel free to send me a note on LinkedIn to do that. If you buy Prime to Perform, or you can go into Amazon and start looking in the book, at the very end of the first chapter is our email addresses. So take a look. You just email me too. Like any of the above, I'd be very excited to get on a call, chat with you about how you can build AI native and people first organizations.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. And thank you for your time. And I just wish you the best in growing your company and helping organizations use AI, but in an effective way to help people get better. And it's really a cool story. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, John. Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.